Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained all about the Montreal Canadiens organization. Welcome to the show. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm going to be your host for today's show. That's for episode 332 of the Canadiens Connection podcast, but I can't do it alone. Each and every week, pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, who is our founder and president here at Rocket Sports. His name is Rick Stevens, and he is here once again today. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
You feeling tired? You feeling a little fatigued? You feeling like it's winter's getting to be a bit of a grind? Any of those kinds of things? Because that's what we've been hearing all week that the Montreal Canadiens are experiencing. It's 1 month past Christmas, in the middle of the season, and my goodness, everybody's talking about the schedule and the grind and how difficult it is for the Montreal Canadiens.
Welcome to the NHL. You're making the big bucks, people.
Well, it's funny because a week ago we were talking about the Montreal Canadiens being the hottest team in the National Hockey League, and a couple of losses this week, and now it's a big grind.
Yes.
Which it is. I mean, 82
it
games.
Is, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough schedule, especially this year with Four Nations. But we're going to talk about how things are going to unfold, the Four Nations, the trade deadline, and then the lead up to the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Before we get to all that, however, we're going to kick things off in our first segment just to let you know what's coming up today on the show. In the first segment, we're going to get you through all of the news around the Montreal Canadiens and hockey in general that happened in this past week. We're going to start with a quick recap of the 4 games that the Canadiens played since we last met here on the show. We're going to get you a roster update, an injury update. We're going to take a look at the Habs prospect report and talk about some of the Habs prospects and how they're performing in their various leagues, culminating with, of course, talking about the Laval Rocket and the ECHL team, the Trois-Rivières Lions, just to give you a kind of a peek in on how they're performing. We're going to hear from Jakub Dobes in a little bit here on that first segment as well. He had some great quotables this week. And we're going to round out the first segment with there's a lot of news swirling around the NHL this week, and a lot of it pretty relevant and some of it pretty blockbuster. So we're going to take care of some trade talk, some big-time roster shakeups, and all sorts of things. All of that leads up to our big topic, which is what segment 2 is made up of. And it's where, we're going to talk about how even though the Canadiens went on this whirlwind of a really big run through December and the first part of January, they've hit a bit of a snag in the road, and we're going to explore the reasons why maybe that's happening. Take a look at what kind of games and what kind of schedule they have coming up in the short term and the long term, and how the trade deadline could or couldn't be affected by how they're currently performing. Then finally, in segment 3, we're going to get you caught up on all of our latest news here at Rocket Sports, and definitely going to be hearing from all of you, because this is an interactive podcast, and we encourage everyone each and every week to send us your comments, your questions, your feedback. And we always ask you a Canadiens Connection question of the week that we really want you to answer. And every week we pick out the best responses and we read those in our third segment. We've got some great comments from some of our listeners and viewers coming this week. So if you would like to have your name thrown in the mix, your commentary thrown in the mix for all of that on next week's show, then make sure you jot down or type it right into your phone and save it. Our Rocket Sports text line, which is 585 585-3-ROCKET. Again, that's 585-3-ROCKET. You can also send us any kind of message on our social media platforms at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, Instagram, or of course on YouTube. If you choose to watch the podcast on YouTube, just drop us a comment right there as well. So there were 4 games for the Canadiens this past week. They got back to kind of a normal weekly schedule, playing, if you take out the Sunday game. They had a Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday. There was a Sunday game thrown in there. But let's start with last Saturday, which was a home game hosting the Toronto Maple Leafs. And interestingly enough, the topic of last week's show that came out just before this game happened was talking about how wonderfully the Habs had been playing. And then they decided to throw a wrench in things and let Toronto score. Maybe they were excited about the division championships in NFL for the weekend. Decided to let Toronto put up a touchdown against them on home ice on Saturday night, losing that one 7-3. And the Leafs scored all 7 of those goals in a row, unanswered, which was, I think, adding insult to injury.
First half of the game was great.
Yeah.
First 30 minutes of the game, the Canadiens had a 3-0 lead. Kirby Dach started the scoring. Patrick Laine with yet another power play goal. Josh Anderson, his 8th. And things were just cruising along. And midway through the second period, it was Bobby McMahon with, oh my goodness, a putrid Sam Montembeault. What were you doing? A soft goal allowed. And then the floodgates open. Leafs with a couple of power play goals. The Leafs had a shorthanded goal. And that Bobby McMahon goal wouldn't have been the last bad goal that Montembeault gave up. He struggled mightily. Sam Montembeault has had maybe his best game opening night against the Leafs, and then just a horrible game last week. And the Leafs walked all over the Canadiens, and it's funny because it was last Saturday that most of our viewers, the questions that they were sending to us, the main question was, are the Habs for real? And we were talking about that a lot last week, and then with some people having question marks, some people being very enthusiastic, and then the Canadiens put in an effort like that, and it was a night to forget.
It was. And fortunately for them, they needed to forget it quickly, because they turned around with a Sunday night game very quickly, hosting the New York Rangers this time. This time, Jakub Dobes got the start in net, and boy, Montreal was able to score a couple of more goals. They ended up winning this one 5-4 in overtime, but Dobes put up another one of those stellar performances that he's quickly becoming known for, making the big saves when he really needed to, absolutely helped to backstop the team to an overtime victory and help shake off that awful game against Toronto the night before.
And he admitted that it wasn't necessarily his best game. He was unlike his other starts, unlike his road starts. And 4 games, we remind you that he had started on the road against difficult opponents. This was his first start at the Bell Center, and he was nervous, not only being at the Bell Center, but because of who was watching him, who was in the Bell Center. We'll talk about that a bit later. But he settled down, and he was stellar. And those 2 saves, they were enormous saves in overtime. He robbed Vincent Trocheck and Artemi Panarin in overtime, and short time later, it was Patrick Laine with the game winner. And he just keeps setting records, and becoming part of elite groups. He became the 13th goaltender to win each of his first 5 starts, and the 4th Habs goaltender to start 5 0-0. And with that record, a 155 goals against, 941 save percentage, and 1 shutout. Another interesting, we'll talk about Jakub Dobes with his quotes later, but remember last week I said there was one thing that was bothering me about Jakub Dobes, not about Dobes himself, but about the jersey that he was wearing, and that was that it didn't have an accent.
Over the S.
Over the S. We talked about the history of that with the Montreal Canadiens. We talked about other players that had the accent. Why didn't Jakub Dobes have the accent
especially since he had it in Laval?
And especially, as you mentioned correctly, that he didn't have it in Laval. Surprise, surprise, surprise. The accent appeared over the S on his jersey and on his nameplate for his locker stall. Mm-hmm. Not saying we had anything to do with it, but my goodness, what a coincidence that...
Maybe the equipment guys in Laval called them up and said, you guys are slacking up there. We've got this covered in Laval. What are you doing?
Yeah, so nice to see that change was made.
Absolutely. Then fast forward to Tuesday night, and this time it was Tampa Bay coming to town. This was a lower scoring affair, but did get finished in regulation. The Canadiens managing to kind of dig deep and get themselves out of a hole against the Lightning, winning this one 3-2.
It didn't look good at the start. The Kucherov goal kind of bounced around in front of that. Montembeault looked a little out of position, but the Canadiens came together. Montembeault was much, much better in this game. He had a very good start in this one, making 33 saves. The Canadiens down early, down 2-0, but came back with power play goal from Slavkovsky, Alex Newhook, and then Jake Evans, 11 goals on this season, third period goal for the game winner with just over 2 minutes remaining in this one. So that was a 3-goal comeback for the Canadiens. That was a strong effort.
Then they traveled to Detroit to play Thursday night's game, and maybe Sam Montembeault shouldn't have started consecutive games because, wow, he just looked. The team looked flat. I mean, they looked completely out of sync from the initial puck drop, but Sam Montembeault did not look good at all on Thursday night, losing to Detroit 4-2.
Yeah, and Detroit's in that large group of teams that the Canadiens are going to be competing with for a wild card spot, for a playoff spot. So this was a really important game, and Montreal did not look good. They look slow. They look a step behind. The Red Wings were on a 3-game losing streak. They were, it seemed they were there for the taking. Montembeault, a couple of bad goals. That goal scored by DeBrincat was absolutely embarrassing. Montembeault was just guessing, going in the completely opposite direction, and DeBrincat had a wide open net. So that was a disappointing game for the team, for fans, and the team just looked tired, and that's when all of the talk started about the fatigue and the grind of the schedule that the Canadiens are in the midst of right now.
They've played 48 games. They've now got a 24-20-4 record that gives them 52 points, good enough for 6th in the Atlantic, and they've crept up to 19th overall in the NHL. So they're certainly still in the conversation. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they can turn things around going forward here.
Really improved their goal differential, as we talked about last week. Currently, they have a 35% chance of making the playoffs, and on pace for an 89-point season. That's both of those stats are a little bit down from what we reported last week. I had to look at the strength of schedule. That's the games remaining and the points percentage of the teams that they've yet to face. There's 34 games remaining. When you work out the strength of schedule, they have the 25th most difficult schedule remaining, meaning that they've gone through the toughest part of their schedule, and so it should be advantageous for them the rest of the way.
It should.
Should.
We will see. Now, another thing that was different this week in terms of the roster, Owen Beck was recalled from Laval last Sunday. Didn't stick around for too long. He was just up for a 2-game stint before they sent him back to the AHL, where he has done a tremendous job, I might say. He's been an absolute just firestorm in the AHL this year. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in the next segment, but did get to come up and play 2 games with the Canadiens.
Kind of have to remind ourselves that this is his first pro season. He's a rookie, and he's in the top 3, 4, 5 of rookie scoring in the AHL. He's had a really good, strong season. Pascal Vincent relies on him. Trusts him in all situations. Unfortunately, when he came up at the last minute and wasn't much time to get used to his new line mates. Didn't play a whole lot. But Marty St. Louis is struggling with the fact that, Michael Pezzetta had sat for so long, so he wants to get Pezzetta in the lineup with Emil Heineman out, but Pezzetta's just not cutting it. I don't know that Beck was given much of a shot. Really, the only game he had any significant role in was Tuesday's game, but then sent down. But perhaps they don't want to. We've heard Jeff Gorton talk before about they like having their top prospects in Laval, that they're in the right spot developing for their development. And maybe they wanted to get him back there.
That is true. Joining him there, interestingly enough, Jaden Struble also went down to Laval this week, assigned to the Rocket on, as the Canadians say, on a conditioning assignment. And we'll see. He shouldn't be there. If he's just there on a conditioning stint, he might just be there for this week. We'll have to see.
Yeah, with the return of David Savard after he was out for a bit with that upper body injury, David Savard hasn't come out of the lineup, and Jaden Struble hasn't played since early January. So an opportunity to get him some game action.
Definitely. So now that brings us to Saturday, the day that we're recording this podcast. The Habs play at home later on tonight. Some roster updates as far as that game goes. Raphael Harvey-Pinard recalled from the Laval Rocket earlier this morning. And it looks like Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher will be game time decisions.
Yeah, Harvey-Pinard he won't look out of place on that fourth line with Yoel Armia and Jake Evans. Marty St. Louis likes to use that line early in games, even from the drop of the puck to establish a forecheck, to bring energy. And that was when Emil Heineman was there. And they were really effective. And you saw when Michael Pezzetta was put on that line, and Marty St. Louis tried to use that line as he had been. Pezzetta was taking early penalties and getting them down. It wasn't the same effect. So maybe Harvey-Pinard, who hasn't had, let's be honest, he hasn't had a great season in Laval. He's 14th in Laval scores, 4 goals, 7 assists for 11 points, -2 on a very good team. But he knows what it's all about. He can bring some energy. He's looked a half a step behind at the AHL level, so I think he'll he's been brought up and will hopefully inject a little bit more than Michael Pezzetta can.
That's right. Anderson, Gallagher, game time decisions, and it will be Jakub Dobes getting the start against the New Jersey Devils on Saturday night. So hopefully he's able to give them some confidence to get another win. Since we've been talking so much about Laval, maybe it's time for the Habs prospect report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
But before we get you caught up with all of the latest about the Laval Rocket, let's first talk about the NCAA. The Hobey Baker Award fan vote is now open, and I don't think this should come as a surprise to a lot of fans to know that two of the top Habs prospects currently playing college hockey are on the ballot. That would be Michael Hage at the University of Michigan and Jacob Fowler at Boston College.
Hage has been great. 25 points in 22 games. Fowler, we talked about him last week. Unbelievable record of 16-3-1, 2 wins this past week, and he even lowered his goals against and raised his save percentage. 171 goals against, 934 save percentage. Sensational season. So what Habs fans need to do is go to hobeybaker.com/vote. It's a big ballot. There is.
Yeah, there's three from each school.
Yeah.
Three nominees.
It's a big ballot, but you make an account in order to verify your information, and you're allowed to vote once per day. So vote for, Hage one day, Fowler the next. But it's a big ballot, and lots of names you'll recognize: Isaac Howard, Jimmy Snuggerud, Ryan Leonard, Trey Augustine, Rhett Pitlick. There's the Pitlick. Anyway, head there and make your fan vote for one of the Canadiens prospects.
In the anticipation for the arrival, hopefully later this calendar year, of Ivan Demidov, we always like to give you an update on how he's doing. He's up to 16 goals and 21 assists for 37 points in 46 games played. And he did something this week, Rick, that he hasn't done yet this season.
Well, last week we talked about his high in ice time for this season. Well, he set the bar even higher, playing just over 23 minutes and 10 seconds. That's a new season high in ice time for him on Thursday in their game.
Now, as promised, Laval Rocket, how have they done? Well, after dropping a game to the Utica Comets last weekend, they then managed somehow on Wednesday night. The Hershey Bears have just been a dominant force to be reckoned with for a number of seasons now consecutively. And they had a battle on Wednesday night, and I'm talking literal. For whatever reason, those teams do not like each other, even though they only play each other. They each play once at the other's barn, so they play each other twice a year, and that's it. But they absolutely hate each other. It always gets super nasty.
And just to add, the Hershey Bears are the AHL affiliate of the Washington Capitals, so it's not as if there's an inherent rivalry between the parent team either.
Not at all. But for whatever reason, they just don't like each other. And so that, of course, played a big factor on Wednesday night. It was a tight game, but Laval did end up besting the Hershey Bears 3-2 on Friday night. Before heading out on... that was Wednesday night. Before heading out on Friday, heading out on the road to Hartford, Connecticut, where they played the Wolfpack. Looked like this was heading to overtime. Hartford put together 2 late goals to tie the game with just a couple of minutes left. Logan Mailloux, who had himself a great night, ended up putting one in the back of the net with 34 seconds left before the end of regulation for Laval to come out on top 4-3. So they're just doing a tremendous job.
And, Logan Mayhews had a bit of dip in his production over the past few weeks, but he came back with emphasis, 2 goals and an assist, the game winner. He had a great game on Friday night.
He did. So the Rocket now currently at 24-11-2-1 on the season. That's good enough for 51 points, making them top dog in the North Division and just 3rd overall in the AHL. They continue their trajectory. They don't seem to have any signs of slowing down. They don't seem to be having any fatigue or mid-season grind. They are, however, going to be without a couple of important prospects for a little while. Joshua Waugh, that's the big one. He's out with an upper body injury. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks, and that's going to be that's a significant loss for them in their top 6.
Yeah, having a really good season, 27 points in 33 games. That's a significant loss for Laval.
On the back end, defenseman William Trudeau is out with a lower body injury. Shorter time for recovery for him, but he will be out 1 to 2 weeks. So that's another kind of piece of the prospect puzzle that they're missing on the back end. The unfortunate thing for Joshua Waugh is that this injury means that he will not be able to attend the AHL All-Star game, for which he was selected as an All-Star for the very first time this year, which is really unfortunate for him. I'm sure that's a bit of a disappointment for him. And the way that it works is if a player goes down with injury who is slated to be at the All-Star game, particularly when it's a team that already has more than one player being represented at the All-Star game, which Logan Mayhew is going for his 2nd consecutive year. The league is not then required to select another new player from that team. Every team just has to have at least one representative. So it wasn't necessarily a given that Joshua Waugh was going to be replaced with another Laval Rocket player, but that's what ended up happening. And I'm pretty pleased with who they chose, Rick, as Joshua Waugh's replacement.
Owen Beck. Owen Beck is having a sensational rookie season, as I said earlier. He's in the top 3 in points for rookies. He's 3rd on the Laval Rocket in scoring. 10 goals, 16 assists, 26 points in 39 games, and a player who contributes so much on the other side in face-offs, penalty killing, and his defensive game. He's also, it's been a very balanced season, offensively, defensively for Owen Beck, and fully deserves to be at the All-Star game in his rookie season.
Definitely. So congratulations to him. Trois-Rivières continuing their good season. Beat Norfolk twice this week before dropping a 5-4 decision in a shootout against Norfolk. So they managed to get points in all 3 of their games. They won 2 of them, and they are currently sitting 3rd overall in the ECHL. So AHL affiliate sitting 3rd in the league, ECHL affiliate sitting 3rd in that league.
Nice.
For the Canadiens, doing pretty well. All right. Jakub Dobes was part of that farm system up until a few weeks ago, and now he is just continuing to make history as he's got 5 straight wins in his first 5 NHL games, as we talked about at the top of this segment. And we did mention that he made his first start at the Bell Center finally earlier this week. He gets to do that again on Saturday night. But we'd mentioned that overtime game against the Rangers and just the big saves that he had there. And here's what Captain Nick Suzuki had to say about Dobes in that game.
Yeah, I mean, he was the reason we won there in overtime. It was big saves. We got kind of caught out there, and he bailed us out, and Ghouls and Patty made a great play to score the winner. And but yeah, he's got a lot of confidence, and I think he was itching to play at the Bell Center, and he had his big moment.
So the captain saying, there he is, a veteran of 4 games going into that one. And he was the reason that we won that game in his 5th start, Jakub Dobes.
Absolutely. Now, shift gears and head over to the other side of the dressing room and ask Jakub Dobes his thoughts and his thoughts on not only the performance in that game, but his 5th straight win. And you're going to get, needless to say, you'll hear in the next couple of clips, Jakub Dobes is a very humble young man.
I mean, yeah, I made 2 good saves in OT, but you guys got to give it to the guys. Like, you cannot, I can take some credit, but these guys play unbelievable. It's not all me, it's the guys. Like everyone has eyes. Like, it wasn't, the best game, but the guys battled, they always came back, and I'm really proud of the team.
Well, and so did Jakub Dobes battle, and especially some big saves throughout the game, and in particularly in overtime. But yes, willing to give credit to his teammates, and you heard the reporters chuckle there that maybe he was going a little bit too far because he played a really significant part in that win.
Definitely. Now, we had been lamenting for a couple of weeks that they hadn't given Dobes a chance to start at the Bell Center. He did obviously finally get that opportunity, and it sounds like it certainly was quite a moment for him.
I don't know. I might play on the road because these guys are nuts. Like, the best crowd I ever had. Like, I said it before, it gives me goosebumps. It does give me goosebumps. I didn't want to look around because I knew. But no, I'm really happy. I'm really happy to be part of this. And as I said, this is the best place to play, and it's a privilege to play here every night.
He appreciates it. He's enjoying the moment and is just very respectful of his teammates and the great support. They were chanting his name in the Bell Center. How great a feeling is that? And he didn't want to look around and get too distracted because he had a job to do, but is really enjoying these moments.
And I like how he joked at the top and said, maybe I should just play on the road because it's a lot of pressure. But we mentioned nerves, and Rick, you teased this at the beginning that there was someone in particular. It wasn't just playing at the Bell Center in front of that passionate crowd for the first time that had him nervous. There was one particular person who was in the crowd that he was nervous about playing in front of as well.
My dad is here, and I haven't seen my dad in a year and a half almost. So he's a big impact on my hockey career. So I just wanted to do good, and not everything was going my way today. So it was a battle, definitely. My mind was definitely racing a little bit, but we got it done, So we are going to celebrate with my dad, and I'm just really happy that we got the win.
Got a nice family moment. He hadn't seen his dad in 18 months, and there he is, and the guy that has as Jakub said, had such a big effect, a big impact on his hockey career. And it caused a bit of nerves early on, but got it together, battled through, made some big saves, and then after the game was able to celebrate the win with his dad.
Moving, just before we take our first commercial break here on this episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast, just want to get you up to speed on some pretty big stories from around the NHL this week, because a lot actually happened. First off, Utah, new to the league this year in terms of its location, Salt Lake City, Utah. Of course, it's not a brand new franchise. It's simply the Arizona Coyotes that have been moved to Utah. And it was always known that they would play this first season just simply as the Utah Hockey Club while they figure out exactly what their name and branding is going to be. You'll recall over the summer, there were a couple of rounds of fan votes. They had whittled it down to maybe 5 or 10. That type of thing. Well, this week, the Utah Hockey Club filed an application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office trying to trademark the name the Utah Yetis. And unfortunately, request denied. due to some potential conflict of interest and confusion with another very popular brand.
Yeah, there's Yeti camping gear. That's how I describe it. Coolers and bags and drinkware and that sort of thing. And the patent office said it's going to create some confusion. So denied the request. The Utah club is still apparently going forward and trying to find ways of getting around it. The Kraken had the same issues when they were trying to trademark their name. I say just avoid all that and go with Outlaws. I like Outlaws. It
was one of their finalists.
Well, it was,
yeah.
and ends in an S, which is very important for me. I know that's not the trend lately, but I think they'll end up being. There's lots of excitement about the Utah Yetis, and they'll figure out a way to do it.
Just a quick side note here before we move to the next one. You mentioned ends in an S, and yes, that's most people prefer when the name ends in an S. But I know I spoke to you earlier this week, and we both agreed that we will give an exception to the brand new QMJHL team in Newfoundland, who came out with their big reveal of this is the Acadie Bathurst Titan have been sold, and next year they will be moving to Newfoundland. And they will be the Newfoundland Regiment. Yeah. Beautiful logo, beautiful artwork, wordmark, just colors. They did a phenomenal job with their big reveal.
Yeah, it's strong. It's a strong name, the regiment. It's a strong logo, and as you say, the colors, the font, everything. They've done a great job with that.
And I am happy to say I did a little bit of digging yesterday, and yes, Buddy the Puffin was at the reveal wearing a regiment jersey.
All right.
So Buddy the Puffin lives on.
So important.
It is. Next up, in case you went to bed early on Friday night, you might have.
We have a trade to announce.
Yes, you might have missed some. Not a small trade. This is the word blockbuster got thrown around a lot on social media Friday night. 3 teams involved in this trade. The Carolina Hurricanes acquiring Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche and Taylor Hall from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Marty Nakash, Jack Drury, and 2 draft picks.
Yeah, massive. This is earth-shaking kind of deal, and I think it's going to take a while to kind of assess how it all worked out. Obviously, Carolina was looking to make a big deal. There's reports that they were involved with Vancouver over Pettersson, JT Miller. They turned their sights on Rantanen. They have the cap space. There's no nothing beyond this season. As we know, Rantanen is a pending UFA, and there was lots of Canadiens fans and even Canadiens beat reporters saying, Patrick Laine is going to talk to his dear friend and recruit him so that he could be signed in the offseason. We know that Colorado was going to have trouble signing him. Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar is going to need a new contract. There's a lot of money tied up already, and that the contract negotiations weren't going well necessarily. But this is absolutely enormous. I think that Colorado did pretty well, I guess. When you think that, better than letting him walk to free agency, they get back Marty Nakash and Drury down the lineup kind of guy and restocking their draft picks. Chicago, I don't quite know how they kind of benefited. They got a 3rd round pick out of it, and they took on some cap space. That was
they're retaining half of Rantanen's salary.
Yeah, that's right. So
Maybe this is a favor they stick in their pocket for down the road.
maybe, and maybe they were looking to move Taylor Hall, but this is a huge trade, and certainly Carolina is. Well, it's going to be interesting to see them later when they finally come to Montreal and see the new look Carolina Hurricanes.
And I'm sure James Duthie and the TSN crew internally groaned as they, oh, here we go. Trade deadline day
Yeah,
already
that's right.
has one big blockbuster
right.
off the board. Here we go.
That's right.
The Athletic, the folks over at The Athletic have now put out their NHL Trade Board 4.0, now updated after this blockbuster move, and that bumps JT Miller to the top of the pile. But in the top 20, there are still 2 guys from Montreal that should be dangling out there as trade bait.
According to The Athletic, the second most likely player to be traded, Brock Nelson from the Islanders, then Ryan O'Reilly from Nashville, Yanni Gourde from Seattle, and number 5 is David Savard. And it seemed that with the acquisition of Alex Carrier that this was going to be 100% that David Savard was going to be moved. Maybe not so much now. Maybe it moves down, some percentage given the place that the Canadiens are and their push for the playoffs. But in the estimation of The Athletic, he's still the 5th most likely player to be traded by the trade deadline. The other guy, and we've talked about him many times, and it's Jake Evans. I think the Canadiens want to keep Jake Evans. We've said that before. Jake Evans would love to stay in Montreal, but if they can't get a deal worked out, then Jake Evans would be highly prized by many other teams, especially those that are playoff bound.
Now the Canadiens play the New Jersey Devils later on tonight, on Saturday night. The Devils had some big news for themselves just yesterday when they announced that goaltender Jacob Markstrom is going to be out of the lineup for the next 4 to 6 weeks after suffering an MCL sprain. And that does something that might be of interest to the Montreal Canadiens and their fans, particularly going into Saturday night's game.
Certainly going to affect the Four Nations tournament. But we remember that back on March 8th of last year, when Jake Allen was traded to New Jersey, they received a conditional 3rd-round pick in 2025. That 3rd-round pick can become a 2nd-round pick if 2 conditions are met. Those 2 conditions are if Allen's club at the time is the wording, obviously the New Jersey Devils now, qualifies for the playoffs. The Devils seem to be on their way to qualify for the playoffs. And the second condition is if Jake Allen plays 40 or more games. At the time we saw that and thought, okay, that's going to be difficult, especially when they brought in Markstrom. Almost impossible for Jake Allen to reach. He's appeared in 15 games so far this season. Can he get to 40? Well, we'll see. Is it going to be 4 weeks? Is it going to be 6 weeks? If it's 4 weeks and 2 of those weeks are devoted to the Four Nations tournament, that's unlikely, obviously, that he's going to get anywhere near there. But it's something to keep. It's in the realm of possibility, more so now than it was earlier this season.
Is it in the mix?
No, it's
Might
not.
be.
Well, maybe.
One last note that we want to make before we head to our first commercial break, and that is acknowledging. This might have been one of those announcements that you saw the NHL make this week, and I'm sure there are lots of people out there that said, I don't really know who that is, and kind of kept on scrolling. But the NHL announcing earlier this week the passing of linesman Danny McCourt, who, and I'll read this right from the NHL PR, press release saying the NHL mourns the passing of linesman Danny McCourt, who officiated over 1,600 NHL games and served almost 2 decades in scouting and development with the league's officiating department. Our thoughts are with his wife, Betty, family, friends, and the many colleagues he worked alongside throughout his career. And the reason that we're going to take a moment to acknowledge Danny McCourt is that Rick and I had the great fortune to meet Danny McCourt a number of times in AHL press boxes all over the Eastern Conference. Rick, I usually casually said hello and sat and listened to him once in a while, but you had many in-depth officiating conversations with Danny McCourt. And so he's someone that we personally were touched by, and always looked forward to the occasions that we got to see him and run into him when we were out covering the Habs AHL team.
Yeah, one of absolutely my favorites to meet in an arena. One of my and I've talked about this before, that there's some great people and people that I learned a lot from. Rick Dudley, one of the smartest guys who was able to pick out things on the ice. Lots of fun to sit beside him, or Vinny Riondo, or Al Murray, the scout from then Tampa Bay and now Hockey Canada. But Danny McCourt was absolutely my favorite. And he would seek me. I don't know how we made a connection, both from Northern Ontario, as we exchanged stories. He from the Sudbury area, me from Thunder Bay. And he would always find a seat beside me. And then that night, Amy, you knew you were getting no help from me.
No, I was just like, I'll see you after the game. I'll go do my photography and I'll see you later.
Oh man, it was entertaining. It was educational. It was just a joy to sit with him at a hockey game. He was just so full of knowledge. As it said, he had 25 years, 1,600 games as a linesman in the NHL from 79 through 2004. Then went into the league office as their manager of officiating, responsible for development of officials, for recruitment of officials. And one of the things that was always nice, he'd always ask my opinion on what about this rule? What about that rule? What about game management? We often saw him at AHL games because he was there recruiting. How do you recruit? Well, he'd notice an AHL player who maybe wasn't going to progress to an NHL career, but was an excellent skater and had great knowledge of the game, great hockey sense. And he'd say, I think that guy is going to make a good official. I'm going to talk to him. What do you think?
Or scouting an AHL official who was officiating that particular game.
That's right. He was doing officiating evaluation at the time. He just a wonderful, wonderful man, full of wit, bigger than life character for sure. A big laugh.
Yes.
and very, very accomplished. And he was in the Sudbury Sports Hall of Fame. He is in the Indigenous Sports Hall of Fame. He's a nephew of George Armstrong, the Hall of Famer from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I still have his business card on my desk, where he had scribbled out his office number and put in his cell and said, call me anytime. Just a wonderful, wonderful man. And we want to extend our condolences to his family as well.
Absolutely. Good memories, and we wish his family the best. He will be missed. Right now, we are going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Coming up is our big topic segment, mid-season fatigue. Are the Canadiens running out of gas? We're going to explore what's going on with this little slump that they've been hitting and what that means for the rest of the season right after this. So stick with us. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? What are you waiting for? You better get on it. The playoffs are here and time is running out. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players, choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, that kind of thing. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, I'm your host of the show. My name is Amy Johnson, and you can find me on X at Rocket Sports. No, not at Rocket Sports. I'm already thinking about introducing you. You can find
me
Rick
at
Stevens,
Rocket
our
Sports,
president and founder at Rocket Sports. You can find me, Amy Johnson, on X at Flyers Rule. That's where you can find me. You can also find this podcast at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, and Instagram. And don't forget to head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe over there, InsideTheCanadiens.com. Well, the Montreal Canadiens really, let's face it, I think there isn't anyone who they didn't surprise, including themselves, when they mowed through one of the toughest parts of their schedule over the last 6 weeks, with resounding success. There's no other way to put it. And as we talked about on last week's show, they were the hottest team in the NHL. Everyone was suddenly sitting up and taking notice and saying, as Rick alluded to a few minutes ago, are these guys for real? Like, what is happening? Then after that 7-3 drubbing against the Maple Leafs last Saturday night, and the loss against Detroit on Thursday, where the team looked just absolutely out of sync, flat, no energy. Everything kind of came crashing back down to earth. And so the commentary everywhere you turn this week has been about the Canadiens being a team who are suffering from fatigue, mid-season fatigue, the schedule grind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we want to do in today's big topic segment is kind of take a look at this concept and this, I don't want to say excuse, but this topic that seems to be getting thrown out by everyone. And we'll talk about really what it means for the Habs leading into not only the Four Nations break that's coming up in a couple of weeks in February, but also then the NHL trade deadline after that. And I think the first thing we want to tackle is that word, fatigue. As Rick said at the top of the show, yes, the NHL schedule is a grueling schedule. It's 82 games, particularly, when rookies come in and this is the first time that they've played at the pro level from, say junior or college hockey. It's a big adjustment, but, it's kind of part and parcel to playing in the NHL. Thursday night, Rick, as we said, flat is definitely a good way to describe how the Habs looked. They looked like they kind of forgot that the game started. They looked a little lost. They looked a little non-energetic. And so, yes, naturally the fatigue question comes into play. But now, kind of we're seeing the consequences and the rolling effect of that is now we're seeing Marty St. Louis start to cancel practices or cancel game day skates and or just make them optional and one guy shows up. And that's something that you start to see snowball.
Yeah, and even in that game against Tampa Bay, which they ended up winning, Tampa Bay should have been the tired team. They were playing a back to back. They had played in Toronto the night before, but they looked to me a little bit fresher than Montreal did, who had some time off. So. There is that stretch of over a month where they were traveling a fair bit. They had I've mentioned it before that they have more back-to-backs this season than they had last season, and they didn't do well in back-to-backs last season. They've been much better this season. So there hasn't been much time for practice at all for fixing mistakes. There's been, guys taking therapy days, game day skates. How many times have we come here on a Saturday and said there's no information for the game tonight because game day skate is canceled? And it's all about managing workload, especially in the middle of the season. And you heard Nick Suzuki talk about it. One of his quotes from this past week was, the last few weeks have been a grind. I think it was 16 games in a row we didn't play in the same place or something. He says, I felt my legs not being there at times. I think our team game can push us through anything. Even if we're not feeling the best, collectively, we'll find a way to get it done. They have to rely on each other, but he's talking about that physical fatigue. But there is, a lack of energy, a lack of spark, but also bad decisions can happen when you're feeling fatigued or when you're going through a grind. Taking bad penalties. We've seen that. The Canadiens have been accumulating the most penalty minutes pretty well all season long. So fatigue is very difficult, but with no player more than the younger players. And that's why, a lot of focus has been on Lane Hutson. Just before we go there, one more quote by Nick Suzuki this week. He says, I think we've been doing things strategically. No morning skates a lot of the times, no practices. We're just trying to save the legs for games. It's really been helping us. And talking about after a road game, staying in that city and then flying the next day rather than going out and getting on the plane after a road game. So he says how important sleep is and rest. Now to Lane Hutson. And Lane Hutson is, he's with preseason games already at above the 50 game mark. And that's getting beyond what he has played before in his career. And I think it started, he had a bad, if not a bad game, a couple of rough games this week. And so much so that Marty St. Louis was asked about if he was worried about Lane Hutson and how he was coping. And Marty said he's learning how to manage his first schedule in the NHL with the volumes of games. It's definitely a learning process for a young player. I'm not worried. It's what you'd expect the coach to say, but certainly it's been difficult. And not that it's it's unusual. Welcome to the NHL.
Absolutely, welcome to the NHL, and it is something obviously that the training staff and the medical staff can monitor. Figuratively and literally. I mean, they do now wear, we've even seen it at the AHL level. They wear trackers and monitors underneath their uniforms that provide a ton of data to the medical staff and the training staff. They can wear them during practice. They wear them during the game. There's all sorts of technology now that allows teams to help better monitor how their players are physically handling the demands of a grueling NHL season.
And maybe it's not really well known. I think fans know more about the wearable trackers. It's the puck trackers, player trackers, those infrared emitters that are in the pucks and that the players wear in their jerseys that allow NHL Edge to have the all the data that it has, how fast they go, and all that kind of stuff. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a system called Catapult. You mentioned the AHL. I guess the first time we experienced it was, I don't know, 10 years ago or so.
Something like that.
And we saw it with the St. John's Ice Caps and Laval Rocket. We saw it with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. And these are data devices. They're kind of like a gyroscope that measure motion in every direction. Every time a player moves, if they take a stride, if they go one direction, it measures everything. Players come off the ice, they take the capsule, and I should say for goaltenders, it's typically in the chest protectors. They take this capsule, they hand it to the trainer. He pops it in. It's like a suitcase. It's a docking device that downloads all that data game by game, by practice by game, and so the team, the training staff, and the medical staff is able to monitor all kinds of data, all kinds of and what they're looking for is things like fatigue. It's a company called Catapult. Lots of teams in the NHL, not all, but most teams in the NHL use them. Teams in other sports, in the NFL, in motor racing, it's collecting data is a big deal. But they have the training staff, medical staff have access to a player's workload, and they're able to advise the coach, like, okay, maybe this guy needs a therapy day. Maybe the team doesn't skate today. So I know that Marty St. Louis certainly consults with his captain to get the sense of whether he needs to cancel a practice, but more so, it's that training staff and the medical staff. And you know that Jeff Gorton was big on modernizing the not only the personnel in the training staff, but the techniques that they use. And this is big, and this is something that's behind the scenes that informs them about fatigue in their players.
Absolutely. And you see it, even the advance of the technology goes even further when you look at NHL Edge. That is now a regular source of information. And I mean, if you want information, there's plenty of information out there now. I mean, the NHL is able to track during games, who's on the ice for exactly how long, all of those kinds of things. There are exponentially more resources available now for teams, training staff, players, coaches to monitor their players' workload than there ever has been before. There's so many resources at their fingertips.
And I just want to make that distinction between the information that goes public and the information that is used for the NHL Edge and the information that's used to manage workload. I'm just a point of say privacy. The NHL players, it's a completely voluntary system. If that information is used in practice, they've got to sign a waiver. If it's collected in games, they actually have to go to the NHLPA and get approval to do that. So, privacy concerns are very much at the forefront, and NHL teams are conscious of that as well. Lane Hudson, pointing a finger at Lane Hudson, many fans are wondering about his fatigue. What about Sam Montembeault, who has played a lot of games? And we talked about a couple of bad outings. You look at going into that Tampa Bay game on Tuesday, and right after the New York game, there was a comparison of the Canadiens' two goaltenders and their last 5 starts. Of course, we said Jakub Dobes, 5-0-0 record, 155 goals against, save percentage 941, shutouts 1. Over that same period, the previous 5 starts, Sam Montembeault 2-2-1, 361 goals against, 871 save percentage. He was struggling, which led to a lot of people, bringing out maybe Dobes should be number 1. Maybe, I don't know that that's the correct debate. Obviously, it's too early for Dobes to be thrown into the fire like that. But maybe it speaks to this whole workload issue, and maybe Sam is struggling with fatigue himself. And maybe that means a different way of assigning starts as over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So when you talk about assigning starts, you're talking about the schedule and their strength of schedule. And you actually touched on this in the first segment when we talked about where the Habs are sitting with their record right now. And you mentioned that in their 34 games remaining, they are down at 25th in terms of strength of schedule for remaining schedule.
So good news there. That's something that when we're talking about a grinding schedule, the strength of the Canadiens' opponents for the rest of the season, 34 games remaining, is favorable. They're at 25th. Another thing to look at when you talk about the schedule is the team travel distance, the number of miles that they fly. And we know that the teams in the East have an advantage over the teams in the West in terms of travel miles. That's the Floridas and the California teams always are going to travel more. Where the Canadiens kind of right in the middle. They and this season a little bit more because they're crisscrossing all over the place. But they will travel by the end of the season 43,300 miles, and that places them 13th in terms of distance. Dallas with the most grueling schedule at 56,000, almost 57,000 miles. So that's, in terms of back-to-backs, they have more, but in terms of travel miles, they're about average, in the average range.
About the average range. The interesting thing is Caden Gooley. Caden Gooley's always got such good insight about things. And yes, while they might have a difficult schedule, I like you pointing out that they're 13th in terms of air miles. It means that there's 12 teams ahead of them that have more travel time, further travel distances on their schedule. So, are those 12 teams complaining about their scheduling and things of that nature? But it also is kind of, you have to understand that maybe for the first 2 months of the season, teams kind of wrote off playing the Montreal Canadiens because of how poorly they were performing. But as soon as they started to step things up, it means that other teams are going to step up their preparation to play against the Montreal Canadiens because they know that on any given night, the Canadiens right now have a shot to win. And I think that you had a great quote from Caden Gooley that kind of alludes to that.
Yeah, Gooley was just offering an alternate explanation for, this struggle. Maybe maybe it is a bit of fatigue, but he says maybe, quote, teams come prepared against us. It's no secret. We've been on fire lately, and we have to be ready for teams to no longer take us lightly. Maybe they did before because of our record and our youth. But they don't do that any longer. So an alternate explanation there coming from Caden Gooley. Just before we leave this, I just want to drill down a little bit into the schedule that's upcoming for Montreal. 34 games remaining in their schedule. And this week is a homestand. Good news. This week is a group of tough opponents. New Jersey, we talked about, they're 9th in the NHL, facing an old friend, Jake Allen, on Saturday night. Tuesday, it's the Winnipeg Jets at the Bell Center, 2nd overall in the NHL. And then Thursday, it's Minnesota Wild, who are 8th overall. So I think that Marty St. Louis, and initially he said, we're not going to call anybody else up. Then they brought to Montreal Harvey Pinard. Maybe they're just trying to get to the February break where there's a bit of respite there. 8 games before the February break, 3 of those I mentioned. Interesting, February 1st, there's no Saturday game, but there is a Sunday game. It's the California trip where Montreal goes to Anaheim on the 2nd. Of course, they're the 28th team overall, an opportunity there. The 32nd place team, San Jose, on the Tuesday, the 4th of February, an opportunity there. Wednesday, back-to-back there against the Los Angeles Kings. They're 12th overall. Interesting there is they have the best home record in the National Hockey League at 15-3-1. And then just before the Four Nations break, it's Super Bowl weekend, and where the Canadiens play those back-to-back matinee games. Kids love it. The Bell Center's full. New Jersey for a 1 o'clock start on the 8th, and Tampa Bay the next day, Super Bowl Sunday, at another 1 o'clock start. And then they have the Four Nations break, 2 weeks off for everyone except Yoel Armia, Patrick Laine, and Sam Montembeault. After the break, 6 games before the trade deadline. That's key. Mm-hmm. In Ottawa on Saturday the 22nd, Mikko Rantanen and the revamped Carolina Hurricanes in the Bell Center on the 25th, and the San Jose Sharks, worst in the league, on the 27th. They go home-and-home series with Buffalo, first in Buffalo on March 1st, and then at the Bell Center on Monday, March 3rd. Then start their Western road trip that goes from Edmonton to Calgary to Vancouver and Seattle. But it's that Edmonton game on Thursday, March 6th. That's one night before the NHL trade deadline.
They'll be on the road for the deadline.
Yeah, they'll be on the road for the trade deadline. And then after the trade deadline, there's 20 games to finish the regular season. But this is going to be lots of things happening, lots of events, lots of things for them to focus on. Will somebody be coming in? Will somebody be going out? There's lots of moving parts over the next little while, but it can be kind of broken up into chunks over the next little while.
One of those things that you mentioned was the trade deadline. And so the question has to be asked, because we've kind of asked it at different stages over the last month or so. First it was, when they were really playing poorly the first couple of months of the season, should make it pretty easy for them to stay the course on their plan for the trade deadline. Don't make any rash decisions, that type of thing. Then they started to heat up, went on that 6-week real just steamer. And we talked about here on the show whether or not that would entice Hughes and Gorton to alter their goals for the trade deadline.
Don't be seduced, I said last week.
That's right. That's right. Trying to, suddenly they're in the playoff hunt. Is that going to prove to be too tempting, as Rick says, too seducing to make a move they normally wouldn't have made to try to bolster the team in the short term, just because of how they're performing. And so now that they've even taken they've had a couple of hiccups over the last 4 games, does that once again alter things for how they're going to go into the trade deadline? And Jeff Gorton actually appeared this week on the Sick podcast, the one based in Ottawa with Pierre Maguire. And here is how, we've heard from Kent a couple of times. He generally says mostly the same thing, but as these scenarios with the Canadiens have evolved throughout the season, the answer to the question of what they're going to do at the trade deadline and whether or not they're going to protect their youth kind of keeps evolving as well. And Jeff Gorton's answer has taken that evolution one more step, I think.
Listen, I think, we definitely have a plan, and we're not going to deviate from trying to build a team that's going to win for a long, we're going to compete for a while, right? So you're not going to see us trade young players that we think are going to be part of that. So if anyone's looking for that, they're probably looking for the wrong thing. But if we see an opportunity, and Kent and I just talked about this morning. We just had our scouting meetings all week. So if there's an opportunity to help these guys, they've deserved it. Right now, the way they're going, we'll see what happens tonight and leading up to the 4 Nation break. So right now, those guys, like we always tell the players, they'll tell us, if we're playing well and they deserve it, can we add and give us a chance? Anytime you can, we want to be in the mix. We want to do, we want to play these games. We want every game to be the biggest game of the year, and they're doing it. If we can help them along, I think we'll look for that.
Interesting answer. Very interesting answer. Nuanced. Not a yes or no. He talked about they have a plan. And they want to be to build sustainable success, not just one and done. But to do that, they're going to have to rely on the young talent that they brought into the organization. So they're not going to be trading young players who they have identified are going to be part of that future. They have traded young players in Jordan Harris and Justin Barron, but didn't see those players as being part of the future. So, but he did say he didn't rule out bringing in someone if there's the right opportunity to reward his team, or reward the players for the way they've been playing. He mentioned, it's not only a hot topic with fans and with media and commentators. It's something they're talking about internally. Jeff said he just talked about the very subject with Kent Hughes, and they've just finished their scouting meeting. So stay tuned. Buckle the seatbelts. This is going to be, this is going to be fun.
So that all brings us to what you think about the bumps in the road that the Canadiens have had, and basically all of the conversation that's been swirling around the media this week, tossing out the fatigue, the grind, the schedule, those kinds of things, and kind of want to hear what your feelings are on all of that. And our Canadiens Connection question of the week is actually a 2-parter this week. First off, we're asking you, are the Canadiens' recent struggles due to overused players or deeper roster concerns? Because I think that's a very distinct thing to differentiate. Are the Canadiens' recent struggles due to overused players or deeper roster concerns? So we want to hear from you on that, but we also want to know, how do you think the Habs should manage their lineup in order to stay fresh? It's something that every team in the NHL has to strategize and figure out every year. But what would your suggestion be to keep the Canadiens lineup fresh, energized, and get them through this difficult push mid-season?
Does Jakub Dobes need more starts? Do they need to be rotating play? There's not been a whole lot of movement from Laval to Montreal this year. Do they need to start rotating guys up to help keep players rested and refreshed? We want to hear from you about your thoughts.
Definitely. So the way to answer those questions, Just send in your answers. You can do it on the Rocket Sports text line. That's 585-3-ROCKET. Drop us a reply on social media on X, Facebook, or Instagram at Habs Connection, or just head over to our YouTube channel, InsideTheCanadiens.com, and drop a comment there. We would love to hear from you. We really want to know what you think on this. And of course, as always, we're going to pick our best responses from all of you and read those on next week's show. So you're going to want to come back again next week to see if yours was chosen. In the meantime, we are going to take our last break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. When we come back on the other side, we are going to do just that. We're going to hear what you had to say about last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. And we had some really great responses. Let's see if yours was one of them. Stay with us. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? What are you waiting for? You better get on it. The playoffs are here and time is running out. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players, choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, that kind of thing. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back to episode 332 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. If you have not done so already, if you're enjoying the kind of content that we bring you each and every week, that perfect balance between news about the Montreal Canadiens, news about their prospects playing in leagues all over the place, and analysis of whatever the hottest topic and most recent topic surrounding the Canadiens is. If you're enjoying that kind of mix for this podcast and you haven't subscribed yet, well, this is the perfect time for you to do that. Just tap that subscribe button. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Or if you prefer, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube Podcasts. And you can do that by just going to our YouTube channel, InsideTheCanadiens.com. And always lots of good things there. Sometimes it is just the Canadiens Connection podcast that comes out every Monday on YouTube. The podcast itself comes out on podcast platforms every Saturday, but the YouTube version, the video version, comes out a couple of days later on Monday. And then keep an eye during the week where I will put out some Habs Hockey Report shorter format videos, usually between 10 to 15 minutes in length at the most. If you're looking for something a little shorter to consume, a little more easily digestible, you're going to want to subscribe for that as well. If you are a newer listener and you think to yourself, oh my, you've got over 300 episodes of this podcast, and I've missed some of those. I'd love to see what kind of content you've been putting out. Well, if you'd like to check out our catalog, we've got a full archive of all of our Canadiens Connection podcasts. You just head over to canadiensconnection.fm and you'll get a full archive of our full history. You can always go back and catch up on some of our great exclusive interviews, great topics, and be sure to check that out. Being here on the Canadiens Connection podcast means that I get to say that I'm part of a terrific team of individuals that Rick has put together over the years here at Rocket Sports Media. We have a great group of people. Even, we've had so many former teammates that are no longer on the team anymore, but still keep in touch with them as well. And really have a lot of respect for everyone that we work with here in our little Rocket Sports family. And Rick, I know you wanted to, before we get to the answers to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week, I know you wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge one of our team members.
Yeah, one of our team members who's been with me for 13, 14, 15 years is Brian Clark, and he and his family are having a bit of a tough time. He shared with us on our internal Slack talking about the untimely passing of his sister, who was a tremendous Montreal Canadiens fan, great mom, and just a wonderful person, a big hockey fan in general, but his sister Sandra, and she had passed away just before Christmas, and on one of the Canadiens Connection episodes, this goes back to August 5th, 2023, Canadiens Connection episode 255. And as you said, if you want to listen to that whole episode or the whole discussion, it was Michael Spinella at the time sitting down with Brian Clark, and Brian, and at the time we were just Michael was interviewing all of the Rocket Sports team so people could get to know each other, and Brian talked about his fondness for his older sister, and his older sister always looking out for him, and that being Sandra, and he had a terrific story. Brian, as a youngster, would write to Montreal Canadiens players looking for an autograph, looking for a photograph, and there was one time where his older sister had to intervene, and let me just play this clip as our way of honoring Sandra's memory.
One player who didn't ever write back for the longest time, it was Ken Dryden. And my sister was a huge fan of Ken Dryden. And she wrote him a letter one day and just ripped into him. And one summer day, I was out playing, and I hear my dad calling, and I can still hear his voice in the back of my head. And I just ignored it. He wanted me to come home. Apparently there was somebody on the phone for me. And lo and behold, it was Ken Dryden, who felt like a really nitwit for not following up on my letters. And yeah, so I spent a couple of hours saying, "No, you're joking. No, you're just trying to make me feel bad. This is just to make sure that I come home next time I'm a golf." But yeah. So, and then, fast forward, some 40 years later, that story got back to Ken Dryden fairly recently, and we chatted a couple of years ago. He called me. So, to make the circle complete.
I just wanted to clarify in case it wasn't obvious there's that Brian's dad was calling him over and over and over again to come home, and Brian didn't go home. So he missed the call from Ken Dryden. After his sister, as he put it, wrote Ken Dryden a letter and ripped into him for not replying to any of Brian's letters, Ken Dryden picked up the phone and, well, as any kid would do, "Oh, Dad's calling me to come home. Why do I care that there's somebody on the phone? I'm not going home." Only to find out it was Ken Dryden.
And in that call, Brian said that he later spoke, many, many years later, spoke to Ken Dryden about it. And Ken spoke about his sister's dogged determination, perseverance. And really, it showed that she not only was a big fan of the Montreal Canadiens, she was a big fan of her brother. and was standing up for him. A wonderful story, and we thank Brian for sharing with us the tribute that was written by Sandra's family, and then Brian sharing this story with us just a year or so ago. We send our condolences to our friend Brian and his good family, and utter respect for a wonderful Canadiens fan and a wonderful Canadiens family.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, of course, we want to hear from all of you about this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. Let me repeat those in case you missed them the first time around. We want to hear from you 2 different questions this week. Are the Canadiens' recent struggles due to overused players or deeper roster concerns? And the second part of the question is, how should the Habs manage their lineup in order to stay fresh? Don't forget, you can text us, you can drop a comment on YouTube or on any of our social media channels. You can even send us an email at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. If it's going to be a lengthy answer and you want to type it out in an email, that would be fine as well. But we look forward to hearing from you, and we will pick out the best ones to read on next week's episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. This week, we're reading out the best answers we got from you on last week's question, which was, what do you think has been the biggest factor behind the Habs turnaround, the December, early January hot streak that they went on? And we had a number of really, really good answers and responses and ideas and suggestions all related to that. And so we've got 4 of them actually to read for you today. Rick, I'll let you start.
Yeah, this one comes from at Habinations on YouTube. He asks his own question. Can they keep it up? Well, that's debatable. I'll enjoy the ride as long as it lasts. I feel a real connection with this team. Everything I wanted them to do, they're doing. Winning tastes like chocolate, losing tastes like dirt. So Habinations had a little bit of dirt in his chocolate this week, but
yeah, I think so.
Hopefully things get sweeter as we go along.
Hopefully so.
Go Habs go, says Habinations. Thanks for that.
Absolutely. At Center Heist 7948 says, great show again, Rick and Amy. That's the norm. LOL. We appreciate that. He goes on to say, thank you. I had a great trip, but it was hard to come back to the winter temps and leaving plus 28 temps. But as far as the magic question, I think there are several reasons for the Habs turnaround. First, the Carrier trade places all the defensemen in proper chairs. 2, the call-up of Jakub Dobes. 3, players now have a bit of confidence and trust in their goaltending. 4, the team is bought into what Marty is selling. 5, they believe and play for each other. This is now looking like a true team. Not sure if they can sustain it, but I'm proud of what they've accomplished. Not sure if they'll make the playoffs, but we as Habs fans should be proud as long as they are in the games and conversation. This team is on the right trajectory and course. This team is going to be exciting and dangerous in the future. Hughes, just stay on game plan. Don't steer off course. Avoid temptations. Go Habs, go. I think we are quite in tune with Center Ice's thoughts there. Great, really well thought out response. Got to agree with all of it. And thank you, as usual, for a great answer.
Avoid temptations, he says, and
yes.
Jeff Gordon answered that question about temptations.
That's right.
Next comment is from at Paul Willett, 6934, and basically answering the question, are the Habs for real, that we asked last week. Paul says the next 2 games will determine against Tampa and Detroit. Now, those are the games they looked fatigued. So Paul says, if not, then next season we will be knocking on the door. So he seems satisfied with this week and looking with this year and looking forward to next.
I like that. Finally, we picked out this response from at Curious Browser. He says, time to kick it into high gear again. The Habs are only a few points from Tampa Bay, whom they are playing tonight. So obviously he had this comment on Tuesday. Let's move past just getting an invitation to the big dance and shoot higher. Get a great seed. That is possible and plausible for a Montreal team that says, let's get it. So sounds like
He wants to be tempted.
I think he does.
Yeah.
He says, bring the temptations, indulge in the temptations. Let's get us there. He sounds very excited for what could possibly be coming down the pipeline sooner rather than later for the Montreal Canadiens. And so it was great. We heard from some new listeners and viewers this week who we haven't heard from before. We thank you for chiming in. We always appreciate our frequent commenters as well and enjoy reading your responses. And so don't forget to get your answers in, and hopefully we can read your thoughts next week on the show. So what's on tap for the Canadiens this week? Well, of course, as we said, they will play the New Jersey Devils tonight at the Bell Center. That's Saturday night with 7 p.m. start. Then Tuesday, the Winnipeg Jets come to town, where the Canadiens will host them in Montreal at 7 o'clock. Thursday night, the Minnesota Wild coming to town. So 3-game homestand this week against the Devils, the Jets, and the Wild. All 7 p.m. Eastern starts. Should be some good hockey, and we'll see how things, if they can turn things around on Saturday night from after that Detroit loss. We, of course, will be back here again next week for our next episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. That'll be Saturday, February 1st.
February?
It's not February. How's it February already? Going too fast. We're already almost a month gone in 2025. Can you believe that? But we will be back here for our next episode. We hope you will be here with us. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And just be sure to join us again next week for another great episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.